Influential midfielder Denise O'Sullivan sustained a shin injury in a tackle. She to be taken to hospital. The Cork woman's got bruising. Thankfully, nothing is broken. We'll learn over the next day or so if she's fit to play Australia in the opener in Sydney on Thursday. Let's hear now from manager Vera Pauw, who addressed the bizarre events which saw Ireland play a warm-up game against themselves after the Colombian kerfuffle.
After a few minutes, it just started up in a way that it had almost no turnaround. There was first a huge challenge on Russia, with a lot of emotions around that, of course, because that was already a challenge out of the loss of the game. And we do not fear any physical contact. You know that. We are ourselves a team that within the rules of the game, we're very, very a tough playing team. I want to highlight that we had the least fouls in our qualifying campaign doing that. We always challenge within the rules of the game. This was out of the rules of the game, let's say it like that. It took minutes before the game started again. I was actually asking what's happening, what's actually going on that pitch, why do we not play? And then within 2 minutes there was this challenge on Denise. So it was a build-up of this is not going into the right, this is going wrong, this is going really wrong. And that challenge, she was in awful pain, of course, potentially a very serious injury. She was on the ground. So I stayed calm. I went calmly to the bench of the opponent. It was just in front of them. And I asked the coach, I need your help. We all want to go to the World Cup. How do we calm this down? And he only said one sentence, something like it's both sides or something. Well, we did not make any fouls, so. But that was calm also. And he went back and did not take responsibility. And then the team manager came from them, and I said, we all want to go to the World Cup. Can you help me to calm things down? And she said it's not intentional. But also sat down, so I got no help from them, although they were calm. The bench of Colombia was very calm. They did not instigate anything, so I want to highlight that. And then it was developing on the pitch, of course, the players were upset. So I decided also the first time in my life to go to the medical team and to Denise, and they confirmed it was potentially a very serious injury. And the players, the first time since I'm coaching them, they feared their bodies. So I took them away, calmed everybody down, took them to the bench, said, you stay here, we deal with this. Of course I support you. But I'm going to discuss this with, of course, with the management, because calling off a game like you don't do that like that. Fortunately, Mark Canham had just arrived, the technical director, football director, and we discussed it. So he took charge of it. I discussed it with the FAI, the CEO, and his decision was in line with what I felt and what the players felt. And there's been contact also with Dublin before we went to the referees. Then everything was calm, so there was no shouting, everything was calm. Sorry?
With Dublin, do you mean Jonathan Hill?
Yes. Then we went to the referees and we discussed the situation with the referees, and the referees then decided to call off the game. This group, everything makes us stronger, isn't it? Every challenge makes us stronger in this group. And after we finished the game, brought them in, and I told them I was so proud of them, the way that they immediately get into a full international game against each other, with all the challenge and all the level of what we needed. Then Katie, the captain, said the same thing. And we said to each other, this will not disturb us from being ready for Australia. And we said to each other, this moment that that's what I said, that the way that we were on the pitch immediately after what happened, which is disturbing for everybody, but the way everybody's handled it, that means that we will not have any negative influence in our preparation for the game against Australia, other than that we hope that Denise will be ready. And at that moment we thought we had lost her.
Republic of Ireland women's team manager Vera Pauw there. Let's link to Australia now and our reporter Kathleen McNamee, who's in Brisbane. Kathleen, how are you?
I'm doing well, John. How are you?
Good, thanks. This is somewhat bizarre, Kathleen.
Yeah, it was a very strange evening. It all started to go a bit weird when initially the media had got an agreement from the Colombian FA that we would be able to attend the match and watch. Like, as we said at the time to them, it wasn't even that anyone really wanted to report on the match. It was more so just to get a little bit of colour, like a little bit of a feel of how the Irish team was looking. None of us really had any interest on reporting on the Colombian team because the likelihood of meeting them at any stage during the World Cup is slim to none. And then a group of journalists arrived out to Meakin Park, where the team have been based and doing their training sessions last night, and were refused entry because the Colombian side had decided that they didn't actually want anyone there. There was quite a few Colombian fans out there, which was quite surprising too, because the training park is a good way outside of Brisbane. It's about 20-30 minutes in a car. Then as the night went on, a lot of us were just back in the city watching the Australia-France game, trying to get a bit of a feel for how Australia were looking ahead of next week's game, when news started to come through that the game had been abandoned and that Denise was on her way to hospital. So obviously that put everyone here on red alert straight away. Messages were flying back and forth. We went over to the team hotel and waited for the players to return. At that stage, the team bus came back, and you could tell that like a lot of the players looked quite dejected. None of them wanted to talk, which is kind of understandable considering how the evening went. And then it was just a bit of a waiting game, waiting to hear from the hospital how Denise's scan went, which we actually only found out around 10 a.m. this morning, Brisbane time. Brisbane's about 9 hours ahead of Ireland. So yeah, it was a long night. I'm running on about 3 hours sleep at this stage, I think.
Welcome to a World Cup, Kathleen. Why would Colombia be overly physical before a tournament they're playing in themselves? And was there a need for this game at all?
Well, this is a big question about why Colombia were overly physical. Vera Pauw, talking about it today, said, she went into this game very much of the idea that it was making sure that players were match fit, match ready, that they had that competitive edge going into the World Cup, but also with the understanding that all the players wanted to play in the World Cup, and you weren't going out to put in any heavy challenges or take any players out of it. She said that initially the game started off okay, and then it kind of got worse as it went on, and it seemed to be the way the game was set up was that the first half was our starting 11 against their bench, essentially. So there wasn't even the starting 11 that Colombia would normally play that were doing this. Vera was very strong to point out several times that she thought the management handled the situation very well, which makes it even stranger the way that the players went about things. There was one player in particular, Caracas, who was signing things for fans outside of the park just after the game and was asked about why it was curtailed. And she told fans that the Irish players were just girls and not in a complimentary way, and that there was they were scared of a few fouls. And then she said, let them eat, insert bad word here. So clearly there was a lot of ill feeling towards the squad, which no one can really understand or work out. Vera did say as well that they had studied about 7 of Colombia's games and they'd never seen them play this way, and that in all her years of coaching she had never felt so afraid for her players and her players' safety. So yeah, it was a strange one, because I think anyone who's watched this team would know that they're not afraid of hard tackles. It's not something that's in our nature. We're a very defensive team anyway, so we're kind of used to getting stuck in. Katie McCabe, I mean, there's Twitter accounts that are literally dedicated to how many yellow cards she gets during the season because she likes a hard tackle. So I don't really know what Colombia were looking to achieve in terms of whether the game was necessary or not. I think a lot of people would have said a friendly this week was a good idea, just because we have so many players on the squad, like particularly the new American-Irish players who've come in who haven't had a lot of time to bed in with the group and play with the group. And we saw in the game against France the startings of a really interesting partnership between Marisha Shiva and Kira Carusa. And I think it was important to develop that a little bit more. So I don't think anyone doubted the need for it. It's just strange the way Colombia decided to go about it.
Denise O'Sullivan is arguably, after Katie McCabe, Kathleen, our most important player. Maybe explain to the listeners why that is.
Yeah, I mean, she is a worldwide star at this stage. I think whenever the news last night broke, it wasn't just Irish people that were getting upset and worried about it. There was a lot of people in the US as well who said that they just wanted to see Denise at a major tournament because of how integral and how important she has been. And the thing about Denise is, much like Katie, she's an absolute workhorse. She plays in midfield, but also expect her to see it every single place around the pitch. She has that technical ability that's just that step above the rest of the Irish team, apart from maybe Katie McCabe. Her vision is insane, her movement, her passing. She's such a collective package, and she's also one of the players that you can depend on. Absolutely. I mean, I think I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I've seen her make a mistake in a game, or either make a mistake and not be the first person to clean it up afterwards. So losing her is literally a worst case scenario at this stage for Ireland. If you were to ask anyone who has followed this team, what is the one thing you don't want to happen, it would be Katie McCabe or Denise O'Sullivan can't play in this tournament. So at the moment, it's kind of just fingers crossed. Obviously, that scan did come back that there was no fracture, but because of the swelling around the area, it's only really going to be 48 hours until we know for certain that there definitely isn't a fracture. So that'll be Monday before we actually know. So hopefully by the time everyone in Ireland is waking up on Monday, we will have some news from Australia about where things stand.
Does that point to maybe a lack of an ideal preparation, or is it unfair to critique the preparation just because the players got injured from an overly physical Colombia that we didn't expect to be that way?
In terms of the Irish team,
yes,
having a lack of preparation, I don't think so.
The question is, do you, like you've been following the team, do you feel that they've done everything right?
From what I've seen, I think so. I don't think it's from a lack of preparation. If you look at the way Vera has structured, not even just the last month since we've had the preliminary squad, but even the last couple of months in the run up to this tournament, she has been very, very particular about her opposition, which is what makes last night even stranger, that Colombia came out the way they did in a behind closed doors friendly. Vera has specifically said after every international break since we have qualified why she chose specific teams and what she hoped the Irish team would learn from them. And I think if you look in particular at, say, the US games, we saw a completely different Ireland there, and we saw us playing in an attacking way that we have not really done in, I don't know, any game ever. Like maybe if we're playing smaller nations like Georgia, we do it a little bit more, but that's just because we have the space to do it. But this is going up against giants of the world and actually being no, we're not going to just throw five at the back and just trust Louise Quinn to head away every ball. We're actually going to attack and set ourselves up to attack. So I think that side of things has definitely been growing over the last couple of months. If you listen to Vera and the way she talks about how she has adapted this team over the last couple of weeks, and a lot of the players were coming in at very different stages. You had players in the championship who had been finished up for nearly 8 weeks by the time they came into camp. You had players like Katie McCabe, who was only finishing up a week before, and then you had the NWSL players coming in from the US who were still in season and only came in for the last week of the camp. So Vera had to be very, very careful about how she made sure these players were all well adjusted, and she was doing that through periodization, which is actually something that she is writing a book on that's going to be released after the World Cup. And I think from watching the open training session at the start of the week, I was surprised at how intense the play was. I thought even just with a bit of jet lag, or the fact that the tournament was so close, they might have been holding back, but there wasn't any of that. There was very much a sense, especially from maybe some of the fringe players, that they were still playing for that place in the squad and they were keeping that intensity high. So I think last night is definitely more a case of it being a very strange situation with the Colombians rather than the Irish being ill prepared, especially when you consider the fact it was like 20 minutes in and there had already been 2 yellow cards by the time that Denise got injured. That's not normal. And I don't think a referee and the FAI would have thrown all their support behind actually ending a game at such an early stage. Like, that is completely unheard of unless they thought there was actually a real danger to some of the players.
So who's going to be the player that replaces Denise O'Sullivan if the worst case scenario comes to pass?
I imagine it will be Jamie Finn that's brought in. She was the player that a lot of people were confused initially that she wasn't in the squad, and the one that Vera said was the hardest to not have there. There was also a lot of talk after the France game where people were saying that, she was the sort of player that we were possibly missing. Izzy Atkinson came on for Katie McCabe after she went off with that slight knock, and you could see her inexperience. Now, Izzy Atkinson has done a brilliant job since she's been brought into the squad, but there was that little bit of inexperience showing and maybe just a bit of fear going up against a team as good as France, one of the top 5 teams in the world. So yeah, I reckon it'll probably be Jamie Finn that'll be pulled in if Denise isn't ready. But it's hard to know as well, because we were asking Vera today, if it's a case where Denise isn't going to be fit for the first 2 matches but might be fit for the third, would you still keep her in the squad? Or, might miss the Australia game but will be okay for the other 2. And it felt like she was leaning towards saying she would probably keep her in the squad just on the off chance that she would be able to play, because she is such an integral cog to that team. I mean, she is irreplaceable. You're never going to bring anyone in the current Irish setup who can take over her role and be the sort of player that she is.
So Jamie Finn into the picture, but who would be in the team? Would Jamie Finn be in the team to replace Denise directly if Denise was, or was it somebody else?
I don't think she'll replace Denise directly. I think it will require a bit of a switch up as to how the team plays. But as Vera did point out as well, like, Denise wasn't in the squad for the first few weeks of the preliminary squad whenever it was first announced, because she was still playing in the NWSL. And that was when we did have that win against Zambia. Now, again, I did think Vera was a little bit off in pointing to that game, because the squad that played was very much not the squad that would ever play a starting game for Ireland. And also, like, there was 5 changes at a halftime to give another 5 people the opportunity to play. So I think it would be a case of having a little bit of a shuffle around. I think you could see someone like maybe Ciara Grant coming into the midfield, or else Lily Agg as well. So Lily Agg is kind of that one player who most people would say the Irish setup is set and that the starting 11 is set if everyone is fit. But the one area that maybe is a little bit iffy is Ruesha Littlejohn or Lily Agg. So there's a possibility that Lily Agg will then come into that midfield setup and the 2 of them would play together rather than constantly competing for that same role.
So the squad flies out to Sydney in a couple of days. How many Irish fans can we expect in that 80,000 plus stadium on Thursday? How well will we be supported?
I think you can expect quite a lot. We were at an event with the Irish ambassador the other night, and we were asking him, what he had heard. Initial reports from when we were back home had been that there were about 2,000 or 3,000 Irish fans coming over to Australia for it. He said he thinks it's closer to 5,000 or 6,000, and then that's not even counting the amount of Irish who are already in Australia. I've had messages from people across the country who are flying into Sydney just to see the game, and it's hard to calculate it because they would have got their tickets through the Australian FA rather than the FAI. So I think I would be surprised if like it wasn't at least a third to half Irish, which will be a pretty amazing spectacle. The Matildas played their final send-off game against France yesterday, and the atmosphere was absolutely electric. And that was only a 50,000-seater stadium. It was a record attendance crowd for them. So you can only imagine what the noise is going to be like when there's 82,500 people to launch the World Cup.
Their star is Sam Kerr, who plays for Chelsea.
Yeah, Sam Kerr is their star. Although interestingly, after Sam Kerr came off last night after about an hour, and it was none other than Mary Fowler, who has Irish ancestry. I don't know if you remember whenever Australia came to Tala and she played, and there was lots of photos with her and her Irish grandparents who still live here after the match. Embracing, which was very nice. So she was actually the only person that scored on the night, and is a real talent. Not getting a lot of time at Manchester City, which is confusing a lot of people because, you know, if definitely an excellent player there to mould. But yeah, Sam Kerr is the star. She is their main striker. But I've said this quite a lot. I think Ireland would be wrong to just concentrate on Sam Kerr, because I think that is in a way what Australia want. They have so many talented players that are playing at the highest level. You know, you look at players like Caitlin Fjord, who's playing with Arsenal. She is also a proven goal scoring record. And then even at every level of the pitch, they have very, very good players. So it's going to be a difficult task, I think, for Ireland, especially when you consider the fact that we were beaten by France 3-0 fairly comfortably in the end. And then Australia managed to get that 1-0 win against them last night and seemed able to harness the nerves and the excitement that was in the stadium rather than being overwhelmed by it, which was a question I had going into that. You know, they're launching a World Cup on home soil in front of 80,000 people. Will they be able to handle the pressure? And I think last night said that they probably will be.
Yeah, and it's important that we don't get overawed ourselves. So is it a case that do no harm is the first thing for Vera Pauw on Thursday? Kathleen, 3-5-2, caution, we're a cautious team, keep it tight, and maybe hope with 20 minutes to go that we can get something?
I think so. I think, like, the first half of that France game was really, really positive in terms of how we played, but I don't know if we can make that last for a full 90 minutes yet. I think we're a bit too early in the development stages of that system, which is unfortunate because it would be great to go into this game. I think that one of the big issues for Ireland is where those goals going to come from. We're not great at scoring from open play. We're still very reliant on a Megan Connolly corner free kick or a McCabe free kick or a Louise Quinn header, you know, very basic stuff. Interestingly, I was watching at the open training session the other day, the teams were playing a little five-a-side, and the players who weren't training at the time were just kind of, you know, running up and down the sidelines, doing a few stretches, keeping warm, apart from Amber Barrett, who was doing shooting drills with Grace Maloney whenever she wasn't on the pitch. So she curled in some very nice goals, which if she managed to do it at the stadium in Sydney during the week, I think she'd be even more of a hero in Irish people's eyes than she already is.
We go then to Perth for the second game against Canada, the Olympic champions. In men's football, the Olympics doesn't matter, to be honest. But is there more of a correlation between the Olympics and the World Cup? I suppose does it suggest that Canada are a nation that are strong?
Yeah, no, in the women's game, the Olympics is a massive tournament, and like the rules are slightly different in that, you know, anyone can play. They don't have that like age restriction for the women's side, and the Olympics has always been, because it's one of the most watched tournaments, always been a big opportunity for our women's players to, I suppose, showcase themselves on the world stage when they weren't getting the same sort of opportunities to do that. Canada kind of came out of nowhere to win that Olympics, to be honest. I mean, I remember reporting on it for ESPN, and I think I had actually tipped Australia at the time to do quite well in the tournament, and then they didn't. But I did maintain that they were going to come good at some stage, and I think they probably are coming good now, so I was just a few years ahead of time. But yeah, no, Canada really did come out of nowhere in that tournament. I don't think anyone expected them to win it at the time, but they did put in some massive performances. They've had a difficult enough run into this World Cup in terms of the fact that they've been fighting with their federation in terms of trying to get equal respect compared to the men's team. They had threatened to boycott certain games, and even you look at like the Nigeria team, they've threatened to boycott their first game, which is against Canada as well. So there's been a lot of uncertainty around the team, but there still are a lot of talented players in there. I mean, you look at someone like Christine Sinclair, the fact that she's still going at this stage, top international goal scorer in the world, an insane amount of caps, probably the last time we'll get to see her in a major international tournament. And then you've lots of really talented younger players, Ashley Lawrence, who's just signed for Chelsea from PSG, Jordan Hutima, who was playing with PSG for a couple of years, just moved over to OL Reign recently in the NWSL. They have the players, and Bev Priestland is a very, very well-respected coach. It's just whether they can put aside all the off-field stuff and concentrate about what's happening on the pitch.
Yeah, Nigeria have had their row, haven't they, as well, over bonuses, and they play ourselves in the final game in Brisbane. Hopefully by that stage we'll have points on the board, Kathleen. So what's the realistic goal then for the Republic of Ireland in these World Cup finals? Not to make up the numbers, obviously, but what can we be happy with?
I genuinely do think a result in one of the games is a realistic expectation. I have been told off for this to be a little bit more optimistic, but I do think that, this Australia team are very, very good. I think we would be doing well to get a result against them. I think Canada definitely have a bit more star quality than us, but again, I wouldn't be massively surprised if we managed to pinch a result, but I also wouldn't be surprised either if we didn't. And then Nigeria are such an unknown quantity. Like, you watch their games and they're so easily dragged out of position, and they're so easily, shook around the pitch, but then they also do have those moments of absolute brilliance where they're able to get a goal. So it's whether we can keep our concentration for long enough and be able to take those shots that we're so bad at doing a lot of the time, to make sure that we actually get the result and make use of the fact that we will be able to hopefully pull them out of shape and leave them scrambling while we're attacking.
There'll be a bandwagon effect, obviously, here at home, Kathleen. We'll all be plugged into this from Thursday, and we'll be all excited about it for about a month. We all know Katie McCabe is billboard. She's Arsenal. We know Denise O'Sullivan, Amber Barrett. You can't help but love her in the interviews. But who else could make their mark? Who's playing well in the Irish team? Who are we going to know more about in a month?
I think there's... I don't know how much we're going to see outside of our starting 11, in the fact that Vera very rarely changes things around, and very rarely does she bring on a whole host of substitutes. I think Kira Caruso is probably going to be an interesting one for Irish people, in that she's been in the squad for a long time and she's, been in and out of it, but she's now taking up that starting role as like the lone striker, the role that Heather Payne formerly used to take. And if you look at her scoring record when she was with HB God, she actually has a really decent record. I think it's like over 30 goals in over 50 games, which is like not too bad a return. She definitely has more of a radar on her than Heather Payne did, who is much more suited to that winger position. So I think she's going to be a name that a few people might stand up and watch. It'd be great to see some of our younger talent like Abby Larkin and Izzy Atkinson getting a run out as well, because whether they can make their impact in this tournament in particular, I think for the future of this team, especially when you look at the age profile of it, which is quite mature, it's going to be really important to make sure that they have that exposure to these big moments and see if they can make their mark on it. Because I think you look at Izzy Atkinson, she wasn't even in the preliminary squad when it was first announced, and played so well that she managed to get herself a seat on the plane. So, there could be some surprises in this squad, and I hope they're all good surprises that come for us.
And to conclude, Kathleen, who's going to win the Women's World Cup and why?
I've been asked this question so many times over the last couple of days, and I've been so concentrated on Ireland, I feel like I haven't watched enough of everyone else. I think if I had to whittle it down, you can never see past the US in these situations. They're the bookies' favourites at the moment. They're not as strong as they have been in previous years, but I also think they like the idea of people looking at them as underdogs and coming into a situation. I also wouldn't discount Germany. I think they have a really, really talented squad, and they kind of snuck up on everyone in the Euros last year. So definitely one to keep an eye on as well.